Hello, me fluff and lovelies, and welcome back to this semi-regular show in which I take a look at some of the units and creatures and entities from the 40k universe and the Age of Sigmar realms that pique my interest. Now, today I was sort of like in several different sets of mind as to what to do, because I love so many entities and creatures from the 40k universe in particular, but from all over the shop, to be honest. From the realms too. I mean, particularly from the realms now. There was a case once upon a time when this show would have been all 40k, but I actually have a real thing for the realms now that they've reshaped them, and now that everything is a little bit more prog rock and interesting. But what I wanted to talk about today, I was going to talk about interrogator chaplains at one point for the Dark Angel fans, of those amongst you out there. I could have called it an Ages of Chaos video then, couldn't I? Yes, anyway, that's enough of the needling of the First Legion. It's so easy to do. It's so easy. What I thought I'd talk about instead are, I know there's been quite a few Drukhari Dark Elder things on here, but that's because I love them. I love the Drukhari, especially since their redesign and reimagining in 4th ed. 5th ed, was it? Was it 4th ed? Was it 5th ed? I can't remember. And Phil Kelly redesigned the entire range and the background and Comora and everything, made them so much more mythological and so much more interesting. What I thought I'd talk about is one of the weirder, one of the nastier units, one of the creatures that even the other Drukhari are kind of scared of, and which even characters like Urian Rakarth and Azrabael Vect treat with kid gloves: the Mandrakes. Now, the Mandrakes, they like a lot of the Drukhari, their origins, they're not that salubrious, to be honest. The Mandrakes in the original incarnation of the Dark Elder, as they were back then, way back in 3rd ed, when they were the Dark Elder were the new race for 3rd ed. The first time that a new race had been introduced into 40k for ages, by the way, since the Necrons, I think, which was way before, back in 2nd ed. The Mandrakes were really boring. Like a lot of the Drukhari units, they were really dull. They were much more staid. They didn't have that patina of the supernatural about them. All they were Dark Elder that wore bodysuits. They were like assassin Dark Elder that wore bodysuits that blended them into the shadows, basically made them so that they could blend into the shadows, leap out and attack their foes. They were the assassins of the Dark City back then. There was none of the mythology, of that strange sort of supernatural element that they have now. None of that at all. The models were dull. Oh my, they were just Dark Elder wearing suits. That was it. They were so boring. They were so dull. And a kind of weird unit as well, because you couldn't really do a great deal with them. They were a bit sort of do nothing back then. There was no real space for them. They were a close combat unit, but you had incubi that were so much better. Incubi were the Drukhari or Dark Elder equivalent of Terminators back then. They were heavily armoured for Eldar, heavily armoured, power weapons. They were really tough. They were really nasty units. They could go toe-to-toe with the likes of Chaos Terminators, Khorne Berserkers, your Blood Angels, everything. Any like really good close combat unit, your Incubi could take them apart back then. But the Mandrakes were just, they were kind of dull in terms of the background, the models were kind of dull, and they didn't do much. So nobody took them. Hardly anybody took the Mandrakes. They were just kind of like, so what? Then Phil Kelly happened in, I think it was 4th ed, it may have been 5th ed, and that particular Drukhari Codex dropped that reinvented the entirety of Comora, the whole back mythology of the Drukhari, and made them much more interesting. It inserted that element of the politics. It made their technology that much more interesting, almost magical in a very dark and hideous way. It completely reinvented the homunculi and their creations in a very Cronenbergian manner. As we discussed before, it reinvented the scourges, made them much more interesting. It also took the Mandrakes and made them completely different. Completely different. Suddenly, the mandrakes were something else. They were this state apart from all of the other Drukhari. There was an element of mystery about them because they not only used the shadows, now they were the shadows. They inhabited them. They became supernatural entities that may or may not have once been Drukhari, that have somehow transformed in the shadow realm that they operate in, and they are merciless, remorseless hunters, trackers, and assassins. They emerge from the shadows and they drag potential victims into their shadow realm, where they toy with them, where they chase and hunt them and eviscerate them, tear them apart. Physically, they became these entities that look like living shadows with all kinds of weird burning sigils carved into their bodies. Their bodies aren't still anymore. They aren't static. They morph and they shape. They haven't got static faces. If you look at the miniatures now, they've got it looks sometimes like they're wearing masks, but they're not. Features emerge and morph and stretch. Some of them look like they're just all mouth. There's only a mouth there. They are incredibly interesting now in the background terms, and the other Drukhari, the other Dark Elder, are actually afraid of them because they can emerge from anywhere. They're totally capricious. Nobody really knows how to hire them. If they're interested in joining a Drukhari raid for their own business, then they will. Otherwise, they do what they like. They operate with complete impunity, because what are you going to do? You can't fight the shadows, you know? That's what the Drukhari, that's what the mandrakes are. Whenever they occur, there is this preternatural dread about them. They are supernatural horror. And they tap into very particular horror tropes which derive from what human beings find frightening. The shadows, the uncertain, the cold, something stalking them. You know, it's so clever, it's so cool. They've gone from being one of the most uninteresting entities in 40k to being one of the most interesting, with gorgeous models, really interesting models. One of the sad things is, in that codex there was even a special character mandrake called Karadruak, and Karadruak, he or she, it's hard to tell, to be honest. I don't think it matters with the mandrakes. I really don't think it matters. Karadruak is known as the Skull Taker or the Head Taker. And what Karadruak seems to be doing is taking the skulls of particular entities from throughout time and space and placing them in a particular chamber in his little shadow realm. And nobody knows why. There's some sort of supernatural reason for it. Apparently, all of the skulls are facing a particular point, and all of their lines of sight converge on a particular point, and nobody knows why he's doing it. And I love that. I kind of love it. It's fun. He used to be a special character. There was never any model for him, sadly. So he went the way of the dodo. Now he only exists in the background, and he's only vaguely referred to. Would love him to come back, because he's interesting. He's cool, you know? And the Drukhari could do with a few new special characters. We've got Urian Rakarth. We've got who's the witch special character? The succubus. Can't remember her name. The one who's gone off with the Inari. But we don't really have many more. We've got Azrael Vect in the background, but not as a physical character anymore. That's another thing. In the more recent Drukhari codices, there's a subplot where Azrael Vect, the Lord of the Dark City, gets assassinated. Yeah. And he gets assassinated by a cohort of mandrakes. And he's not just assassinated, he's totally killed. Like, there's no way he should be able to come back. Of course he does. He resurrects himself. And it turns out that he may or may not have been involved with his own assassination attempt. And also, he brings reprisal against everyone who's taken advantage of his absence or who celebrated his absence. But he doesn't take reprisal on the mandrakes, the ones who actually physically killed him. He doesn't take reprisal on them, because even he has a healthy dose of respect for the mandrakes. They're like the scourges, you know? They are a class and a species apart, and nobody knows what happened to them. Nobody knows why they became what they became. There are a couple of theories. One of them states that they are the children of Eilindrach, which is a part of Comora that collapsed into a spar of the webway, into some other state of reality, where they became bonded with shadow entities. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what they are, and that makes them scary too. That makes them even more frightening. They can move through dimensions. Nobody knows where they're going to strike from. Nobody knows what their limitations are. You can't defend against them. They're really cool. The mandrakes are horror made manifest in 40k. In a universe that is replete with horrors, the mandrakes are particularly horrifying.